Okay, welcome to your very first lesson in geometry, and I think it's very good that we celebrate the fact that you are finished with Algebra 1. That is a great accomplishment. For some of you, you might have really enjoyed that class, and for others, it might have been a nightmare. And I don't know who's who, but I know everyone at some point or another might have had a day like this.
Remember to visualize the complex problems and relax. The test will start now. At 7:30 a.m., an express train traveling 60 miles an hour leaves Santa Fe bound for Phoenix, 520 miles away. Shh. Visualize it, Bart. At the same time, a local train traveling 30 miles an hour and carrying 40 passengers leaves Phoenix bound for Santa Fe. It's 8 cars long and always carries the same number of passengers in each car. An hour later, the number of passengers equal to half the number of minutes past the hour get off, but 3 times as many plus 6 get on. At the second stop, half the passengers plus 2 get off, but twice as many get on as got on at the first stop.
Ticket, please.
I don't have a ticket.
Come with me, boy. We've got the stowaway, sir.
I'll pay. How much?
Twice the fare from Tucson to Flagstaff minus 2/3 of the fare from Albuquerque to El Paso.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that happens to everybody. At one point or another, a nightmare day in class, or just a math nightmare, frankly, that can happen too. Here is sort of my hopes for you guys. You should have a notes guide in your binder, and it's going to look very similar to what you see me doing on this page right here. Feel free to write what I write, or maybe you need to add some stuff that I say but don't write. Maybe at some point you need to pause the video and even rewind if you miss something. So this is your notes. This is for you, okay? I'm not going to check it over, but you need to have something written down. That way you can do the practice problems and follow your guide once we are finished with this lesson. Now, I know some of y'all are eager to just jump right into geometry, and some of you are just wondering, like, what is geometry? So let's talk a little bit about that. I think if somebody had to sum it up in one word, they probably would use the word shapes, right? And you've done a lot of shapes over the years, you know. I mean, it is going to be circles and squares and triangles, pentagons, other polygons. That is part of the class, okay? It's going to be area, perimeter, surface area, volume, but it's also more than that. In geometry, you're going to find it's very logic based. You have to prove yourself by using some different definitions, and you're going to have to show logical steps and logical thinking patterns. It's also a lot about angles and parallel lines, okay? And you may know a little bit about both of those, but it's going to get like crazy in depth, okay? And all of this stuff, even though you're thinking it's just pictures or it's just lines, there can't be algebra, right? We're done with algebra. No, we're not done with algebra. Algebra will be involved very, very heavily. And just one example, you probably already saw something like this in algebra, where maybe your teacher gave you a square, and your teacher said, hey, instead of this side being a number, maybe this side is x. And if you know that the perimeter is, let's say perimeter is like 24, then she'd made you figure out how long each side is. So you've done this problem before, probably with your algebra teacher, and you would have to say, well, if it's a square, everybody's the same length, which means if that's x, then that's x, and everybody's an x. And for perimeter, you're supposed to add up the sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4 x's is equal to 24. And from there you had to find the missing number, which of course in this case would be 6. Now, if that was hard for you or didn't come naturally, that's what day one's going to be about, is solving basic equations. Okay, guys? So we're going to start right here with basic one-step equations. So a one-step equation just means that, the goal is to solve for x or n or p, whatever the letter is, and every teacher has their own way of showing you. I'm going to teach you the same way that I taught my Algebra 1 class, which is very simple. You need to focus on where's the equal sign, and I just sort of draw a vertical line down the paper, and I want to isolate the letter, the variable. It needs to be by itself. So right now there's a 3 in the way. And the only way that you can move things across the equal sign is by doing the opposite of what you see. So if I want to get rid of this 3, right now it's positive because there's nothing in front of it, so it's assumed to be positive. So if it's a positive 3, I need to subtract 3 from both sides. And that's my first step. And the goal here is to zero this out, which of course 3 minus 3 is 0. And then I bring down my x, and it's a positive, and there's no number in front of it, so I just drop it down. And then what is 12 minus 3? Well, 12 minus 3, last I checked, was 9. And I'm done. The x is by itself, so I know that my answer is 9. So what about if nothing is added or subtracted, but instead there's a number stuck to the variable? It's a coefficient stuck to a variable. Well, the relationship here is multiplication. And earlier I said to get across this vertical line, to get across the equal sign, you have to do the opposite of what you see. Well, if this is multiplication, what's the opposite of multiplication? Well, that would be division. So I need to divide off this number that's stuck to the variable. And if I do it to one side, I got to do it to the other side. These are going to reduce because it's just a 1, right? The same number over itself is just a 1, and it's gone. And it leaves an n. And then what is 16 divided by negative 4? Well, that would be negative 4. And so we have our answer for n. And our last one is something that I have a feeling some of you may not have seen what I'm about to do, but it is a wicked awesome trick. When dealing with fractions, people kind of freak out a little bit, and they're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Do I divide, or do I multiply, or whatever? Okay, we're going to show a trick, and that trick is when you have a fraction and you want it to go away, or you want it to turn into 1, you can multiply by its reciprocal, okay? So a reciprocal is when you flip the top and the bottom, and that part you probably do remember from middle school. But so if this is a 2/3, I'm going to multiply by the flip-flop, which is 3/2, and the purpose of this is to get all these numbers to cancel out, and it does leave the p by itself, okay? But if I multiply this side by 3/2, then I also have to multiply this side by 3/2, okay? So whatever you do to one side, you got to do the other. So here, those are all gone. 3 on top, 3 on bottom is a 1. 2 on top, 2 on bottom, that cancels out to a 1. And so I just have to math this out over here, okay? So how do I do a whole number times a fraction? Well, I can turn that whole number into a fraction by sticking it over 1, and then all you have to do is top times top and bottom times bottom. So that would be 15 on top, and then 1 times 2 is 2. So p is 15/2. And there is no need to do a decimal. Please do not do a decimal. You don't even have to do a mixed number. This is a perfectly happy answer that your high school teachers will enjoy, okay? No need to change it around to anything else. Okay, so we're now going to talk about a two-step equation. So just like the first page, but maybe there's one more step involved. And it's putting the two pieces together from the last page. And so I'm going to go a little bit quicker here since we're warmed up now. Same thing, I'm going to start with looking for my equal sign and drawing my vertical line. So I remember that if I'm crossing the vertical line, I have to do the opposite of what I see. Now my x is here, and yes, there's a 7 stuck to it, but before I can get rid of that, I need to get rid of this 4 in the front, okay? Well, right now it's positive because there's nothing in front of it, so if it's a plus 4 out front, I need to subtract 4 from both sides. Now this will become a 0. I'm going to bring this whole thing down. Notice that minus comes with it. It's really just a negative. And then I need to do a negative 17 minus a 4. So negative 17 minus 4, I believe, is negative 21. And now I need to get this negative 7 off the x. So this is why it's a two-step equation, because I'm not done after step 1. I have one more thing to do. So to get the negative 7 off the x, right now they're multiplied. So the opposite of that is division. If I divide one side, I need to divide the other side. Those are going to cancel. And now I'm just left with this x that's left over and whatever negative 21 divided by negative 7 is. And last I checked, that was 3. Okay, so that's how that one works. Alright, let's look at something like this. This one used to really freak out my Algebra 1 students. They did not like this one because they don't like variables on both sides, and maybe you're the same way. But it's really just the same thing as this. What you want to do here is you want to get the letters on the same side and get the number on the same side, okay? So if you're happy with the R here, but you're like, man, I really wish this R was over there too, well, send it on over, okay? Send it over. Right now it's a positive 3R. So if I subtract 3R from both sides, then that'll accomplish two things. It'll make it be gone over here, because that's just going to be a 0 now, and I can bring down my negative 1. And here we will be able to put these together because they are like terms. They both have an R, and there's just an invisible 1 here in case you forgot. So we're just going to do 1 minus 3 and have the R behind it. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2R, okay? So that's step 1. Now, almost done. The last thing is to get the R by itself. So how do I get the negative 2 off of the R? Well, they're times right now. Sorry, they're multiplied right now. So I can just divide it off. So if I divide one side, I have to divide the other. Now my R is isolated, and over here I have a negative 1 over a negative 2. Well, those don't reduce, but a negative over a negative does change into a positive. So you can leave it just like that, okay? And our last example of this type is going to be, there's the same kind of idea. We're going to draw our line down the equals. The y, there's only one y, so I'm just going to leave it alone, and it looks like this 2 is in the way. So this will be my first issue. So I need to subtract 2 from both sides, because it's a positive right now. So subtract 2 from both sides. That'll go away. I'm going to bring all that jazz down. When I bring that down, it looks like that. And what is 8 minus 2? Well, that would be a 6. And now I need to figure out how to get that y by itself. Well, this is a fraction. And remember that new little kind of a trick that I showed you. If you don't like a fraction and you want it to go away, you can multiply by the reciprocal. I wish my color would change here. There we go. Multiply by the reciprocal. So that just means the flip-flop, okay? So I just want to make it a 2 over 1 now, and I'm still going to keep the negative. I just flip-flop the numbers. And so if I do that to one side, I have to do that to the other. And all of this is going to cancel out. I'm just going to leave my y. And then over here, what is 6 times a negative 2 over 1? Well, that's just going to be a negative 12. And that'll be my answer there. Okay, so if you wanted to make any notes to yourself at this point, feel free to pause the video and write a couple of things down. I know I didn't write out step 1, step 2, step 3, but you might want to add a couple things in your boxes if you want, you know, like make sure you do the opposite to get it to the other side, or maybe the order of how we did things, you know. We got rid of the extra adding and subtracting first, and then we did the dividing. That might be a good note to make. And our last ones are multi-step. So it's the same thing that we just did, but maybe there's like 3 or 4 steps involved now instead of just the 2, okay? Now, this one, I haven't said the word yet, but you might recognize this parentheses as being the distributive property. Let me see if I can spell. I'm a math teacher, not an English teacher. Distribute. There we go. We need to distribute first, okay? And distributing, if you don't remember, is where you take the number out front that's being multiplied to the parentheses and you multiply it to everything inside the parentheses. So that would be my first step anytime you see parentheses like that. So let's distribute first, then do it just like the other problems. So what is 6 times x? Well, it's 6x. What is 6 times negative 1? Well, that would be a negative 6. And then the other side I'm just going to recopy. It's not in parentheses, so you don't have to multiply it by 6 also. And then from here, y'all, it is so much like the problems we just did. It's going to be pretty quick, okay? The 6x I want to leave alone because it's the x and I like that number over here on the left. So this is my extra number. So if I'm minusing a 6, the opposite of that is to add a 6 because you got to do the opposite and then you got to do it to both sides. So that'll be a 0 now. I'll bring this down. And then 10 plus 6 is 16, okay? Now, last step, the 6 is stuck to the x. To get that away, I need to divide it away. And my answer looks like it is 16 over 6, okay? Don't make it a decimal. If you want to reduce it, that would be awesome because these are both even numbers. And so if I divide the top by 2 and divide the bottom by 2, I could write this as 8 over 3. And that's probably what your teachers are going to want you to do. That's a much prettier answer, okay? Now, the really, really fun one. It looks horrible, I know, but it's really not going to be bad, okay? It's just going to be distributing twice. We're going to do it on this side, and we're going to do it on that side, and we're going to have lots of fun steps afterwards, okay? So let's first distribute. So I'm going to do this side. The 2 goes to both. 2p plus 2 times 3 is 6. I'm going to recopy my equals. And then over here, I'm doing a negative 5 and distributing it to both. Okay? So a negative 5 times a p is a negative 5p. And then a negative 5 times a positive 4 is a negative 20. So you can write minus 20 or plus negative 20. It really doesn't matter. This is how I like to write it. I just like to subtract it. And from here, same thing. We're going to draw the line down the middle of the page. And I need to group the stuff that's similar together. Like I like my variable on the left. So I'm going to leave this alone, but that means I want this 5p to come over to the other side. And that way it's with this other one. Well, if I want it to come to the other side, I have to do the opposite. So I need to add 5p to both sides. This is going to be a 7p. I'm going to bring down my plus 6. Here, those are a 0, and then I bring down my negative 20. Okay? And now this looks very much like what we had here. Okay? So I want this letter by itself, so I got to get rid of this 6. So the opposite means subtracting it. Bring down my 7p. Plus 6 and a minus 6 are gone. Minus 20 minus 6 is minus 26. And now, one more step and I'm there. I need the 7 off the p, so let's divide it off. And I'm going to have p equals negative 26 over 7. I get it, it's not pretty, but it's going to be worse as a decimal. It's going to be worse as a mixed number, so just leave it alone, okay? This is a perfectly fine answer, and it doesn't reduce. Alright, last problem, and then you get to go enjoy your practice problems and the rest of your week, okay? I'm going to start by drawing my line because I didn't see anything that told me to distribute, okay? There was no parentheses, so there's no distribute. So now it's just starting off kind of looking like this step. It's just this step with ugly fractions, but it's going to be the same thing, I promise, okay? I like my s over here. I do not like my s over there. So I need to do the opposite of what I see to bring it over. If it's a plus 1/5 s, I need to subtract 1/5 s from both sides, okay? And when I do that, the 3 is just going to drop down. And then what is negative 4/5 minus 1/5? Well, they already have a common denominator, so I just need to do a negative 4 minus a 1. And that would be a negative 5/5. Now, what does that reduce to, everybody's? It looks like a negative 1. So I'm going to call this a negative 1s. You can write the 1, but you don't have to. Okay? Now, on this side, the only thing, this is gone now, and the only thing left is this 1. So the s is good. It's where I want it. The 3 is now in the way. So how do I get rid of that 3? Well, it's a positive, so I need to subtract it. And now it'll be gone. I bring down this whole thing. So bring down the negative 1s. And then what is 1 minus 3? That's a negative 2. And I'm there. I'm almost there. The only thing is that there's a negative 1 in front of this s, and you really want it to be a positive. So if you don't like that there's a negative 1, then just divide off the negative 1. And so s will be positive 2. And that would be my final answer. Whew, okay. That was like 3 weeks worth of algebra that you guys learned in about 15 minutes. So I left you a box at the bottom that are what are some things to keep in mind. I guess this is for you, okay? Anything that I said that stuck out as ooh, I might forget that and I need to do that, feel free to write it in the boxes. I definitely think something important is to distribute first. If it's there, distribute first, but only if it's there. Sometimes you don't see distribute property, but that would be the first thing. And then I like to do the add subtract numbers. You'll notice in all my problems I was adding and subtracting before I did the dividing. Okay, that's kind of the order of how I do a problem. But whatever works for you and whatever notes you want to make, please do so. And then try the practice problems. After you've really tried the practice problems, maybe even after you've come to the tutorial with me, if you are doing that, then you can watch the video on the solutions and how to do them. If you are not coming to the tutorial with me, then try all the problems and use the second video of me working out the answers as just your sort of a helper to help you get through those homework problems, okay? All right, we will see you guys next week, and we'll actually get to start some geometry next week instead of just an algebra review. Thank you very much.